The restaurant was called Oriole. 5th Avenue, Manhattan. The kind of place where reservations require 3 months' notice and a black American Express card. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across white tablecloths. Waiters moved like shadows, silent and efficient. And at table 12, Marcus Wellington was holding court. He sat at the head of the table, 52 years old, wearing a Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His watch was a Patek Philippe. His smile was the kind that came easy to men who believed the world owed them applause. Across from him sat 2 business associates. Richard Chun, a venture capitalist worth somewhere north of $800 million. And David Okonkwo, Marcus's own chief financial officer, a careful man with careful eyes who noticed things other people missed. And then there was Elena. She sat to Marcus's right, 48 years old, wearing a simple black dress that cost $12,000 but looked understated. Her jewelry was minimal, a thin platinum necklace, small diamond earrings, and a wedding band that had been on her finger for 15 years. She held a glass of wine but hadn't drunk from it in 20 minutes. She was listening. She was always listening. That's what she did. She listened while Marcus talked, and Marcus loved to talk. The expansion into the Asian market is a no-brainer, Marcus was saying, gesturing with his fork. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the demand, and honestly, we've got the vision. My vision. This company wouldn't exist without my ability to see 3 moves ahead. He laughed, that confident laugh that men in expensive suits perfect over decades of being told they're brilliant. It's like chess. You have to anticipate. You have to be willing to make the bold move. Richard Chin nodded politely, but his eyes flickered to Elena. Just for a second. Just long enough. And the capital requirements? David asked carefully. The expansion would need significant funding. 200 million at least. Marcus waved this away like it was a minor detail. I've got investors circling. They know what I've built here. They know I turn everything I touch into gold. He took a sip of his scotch. It's about reputation. About trust. About proving you can deliver. That's when Richard turned to Elena. And Elena, Richard said, his voice warm but curious, what do you think about this expansion? You've been in tech circles longer than any of us. What's your read on the Asian market? There was a moment, a brief, crystalline moment where the table went quiet. Elena looked up from her wine glass. She opened her mouth to speak, and Marcus interrupted. Richard, Marcus said, smiling that indulgent smile, the one that men use when they think they're being charming. Elena's more into charity galas and interior design. She wouldn't really understand the technical side of this. It's pretty complex stuff. Elena's mouth closed. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. Something cold and final. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. David looked down at his plate, but Marcus wasn't finished. Honey, Marcus said, turning to Elena with that same condescending smile. Let the adults talk business, okay? This is pretty advanced strategy. Elena nodded once, still silent, still composed. Marcus turned back to his associates. Honestly, gentlemen, marriage is about balance. I handle the empire building. I handle the big decisions. Elena handles the home, the social calendar, looking beautiful at events. He laughed again. She's been a bit of a burden lately with all her little hobby investments. Real estate, some startup stuff. But we indulge her. It keeps her busy. The word hung in the air like smoke. Burden. David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Richard's eyes went flat and hard. And Elena set down her wine glass with a precision that suggested years of practice at controlling her reactions. Excuse me, gentlemen, Elena said, her voice perfectly level. I need to make a call. She stood with the grace of someone who'd been trained in ballet as a child. Her movements were fluid, unhurried. She picked up her clutch purse. She smiled at the table, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And she walked toward the restroom, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Marcus didn't watch her go. He was already talking again, already moving on to the next point in his pitch, already forgetting what he'd just said. already assuming that everything would continue exactly as it always had. He had no idea that in the next 72 hours, his entire world would detonate. Elena walked into the women's restroom. It was empty, all white marble and gold fixtures. She walked to the sink and set down her purse. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was composed, elegant, successful-looking. But her hands were shaking. She pulled out her phone. It was encrypted, the kind of phone that people who value privacy use. She dialed a number from memory. It rang once. Catherine Wu speaking. Elena took a breath. Catherine, it's time. Initiate protocol severance. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Catherine's voice came back, crisp and professional. Are you certain? Once we begin, there's no reversing it. I'm certain. Understood. I'll mobilize the team. We'll convene at the office in 1 hour. Thank you, Catherine. Elena hung up. She looked at herself in the mirror again. This time, she didn't see a wife who'd been called a burden. She saw something else. Something colder. Something that had been waiting for 15 years to emerge. She reapplied her lipstick. She straightened her necklace. She picked up her purse. And she walked back to the table where her husband sat, still talking, still oblivious, still believing he was the center of the universe. She would let him believe it for 3 more days. And then she would show him what a burden really looks like. But to understand what happened next, you need to understand who Elena really was. Because Marcus Wellington thought he knew his wife. He thought he'd married a beautiful woman from a good family who'd done some tech work in her 20s before settling into the comfortable role of executive wife. He thought her money came from a modest inheritance. He thought her interest in investing was a hobby, something to keep her occupied while he built empires. Marcus Wellington was wrong about everything. Elena Volkov was born in Moscow in 1976 to a mathematics professor and a software engineer. When the Soviet Union collapsed, her family emigrated to Silicon Valley. She was 15 years old. She spoke 3 languages. And she understood computer systems the way some people understand music. By 22, she'd graduated from Stanford with degrees in computer science and economics. By 25, she'd built a financial software company that revolutionized how hedge funds tracked algorithmic trading patterns. By 28, she'd sold that company for $200 million. And then she'd done something unusual. She'd disappeared. Not literally, but professionally. She'd taken her $200 million and she'd invested it with a precision that would have impressed Buffett himself. She'd gotten into Bitcoin in 2009 when it was worth pennies. She'd invested in Tesla before anyone believed in Elon Musk. She'd bought real estate in neighborhoods that would gentrify 10 years later. She'd backed startups that became unicorns. By the time she was 33 years old, Elena Volkov was worth approximately $700 million. And almost nobody knew. She'd done it all through shell companies, through anonymous investment vehicles, through a network of lawyers and financial strategists who valued discretion above all else. She sat on the boards of 6 major companies under different names or through proxy representation. She was a limited partner in 3 of the most successful venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. She'd funded dozens of startups, including several that had IPO'd for billions. She was a ghost in the machine of tech wealth. Invisible but essential. And then she'd met Marcus Wellington at a tech conference in 2009. He was 37, charming, ambitious. He was a sales director at a mid-tier software company. He had dreams of starting his own firm. He had charisma. He had confidence. And when he asked her to dinner, she'd said yes. Their courtship had been whirlwind. Marcus was attentive, romantic. He'd loved that she was mysterious about her wealth. He called it intriguing. He'd asked her to marry him after 6 months. She'd said yes, believing that partnership meant supporting someone's dreams even if it meant putting your own ambitions aside. She'd been wrong. The wedding was in 2010. Intimate, elegant, and almost immediately, Marcus had started planning his company. He'd come to Elena one night with projections, with business plans, with that gleaming ambition in his eyes. "I need seed funding," he'd said. "About $50 million to really do this right. I've been talking to venture capitalists, but they want too much equity. I was thinking maybe you could. Elena had stopped him gently. I can help, but I think it's better if the funding comes through anonymous channels. It'll look better to other investors if you're not just using family money. It establishes credibility. Marcus had looked relieved. You can arrange that? I can arrange that. And she had. Through one of her shell companies, she'd transferred $50 million into Marcus's business account. To him, it looked like an angel investor who'd been impressed by his pitch. He never knew it was his wife's money. She never told him, because she wanted him to feel like he'd earned it. That was her first mistake. Over the next 5 years, Marcus's company grew. And every time it hit a rough patch, every time funding fell through, every time the company needed a cash infusion to survive, Elena made it happen. Through anonymous investments, through shell companies, through carefully orchestrated venture capital rounds where she was the silent majority stakeholder. She put in $80 million more over those 5 years. And Marcus took credit for all of it. He told the press he was self-made. He told investors he had a brilliant instinct for fundraising. He told their friends at dinner parties that he'd built something from nothing through sheer will and intelligence. And Elena sat beside him, smiling, saying nothing, because she loved him, and because she believed that a good partner supported without needing recognition. She believed that her role was to be the foundation while he was the visible structure. She believed in sacrifice for the sake of partnership. She'd been wrong about that too. The change had been gradual. Year 6, Marcus started introducing her as my wife, instead of Elena. Year 7, he started talking over her at dinner parties. Year 8, he stopped asking her opinion on business decisions. Year 9, he started making jokes about how she didn't understand the complexity of what he did. Year 10, he started staying late at the office. Very late. By year 11, there was a woman named Amber, 28 years old, marketing director, ambitious, impressed by powerful men. Elena had known about Amber for 2 years. She'd known because she'd seen the credit card statements, the expensive restaurants she'd never been to, the hotel rooms charged during business trips that didn't match his travel calendar, the jewelry purchases that never made it home to her. She'd known, and she'd said nothing, because part of her was still hoping that the man she'd married was still in there somewhere, that the partnership they'd built still mattered. And then Marcus had called her a burden in front of colleagues who knew exactly who she really was. That's what people didn't understand about breaking points. They're not always loud. They're not always dramatic. Sometimes they're just a single word spoken in a specific tone at a specific moment. And something inside you that's been bending for years finally snaps with a sound only you can hear. Burden. Elena had heard the snap, and she'd made the call. Now, 1 hour after that dinner, Elena sat in a conference room in a building Marcus had never been to. It was her building owned through one of her holding companies. The room was sophisticated, minimal. Glass walls overlooking the Manhattan skyline. And around the table sat 3 people who knew more about Elena's real life than her husband ever had. Catherine Wu, 55 years old, one of the most feared divorce attorneys in New York. She'd represented billionaires in 3 different countries. She didn't lose cases. She annihilated them. Yuki Tanaka, 42 years old, financial strategist who managed portfolios for clients who valued absolute discretion. She knew where every dollar of Elena's $700 million was invested, and she could move that money anywhere in the world in under an hour. And James Morrison, 38 years old, forensic accountant, the kind of accountant who'd worked for the FBI before going private, the kind who could find hidden money in offshore accounts and trace financial crimes through layers of shell companies. These 3 people had been preparing for this night for 6 months. Talk to me, Elena said. Sitting down at the head of the table, Catherine opened a leather portfolio. Protocol Severance has 17 phases. We've had the first 12 phases prepared and ready to execute since April. The remaining 5 phases can be activated within 48 hours. She looked at Elena directly. But I need to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely certain? Once we begin the financial separation, it will be immediate and irreversible. I'm certain. Yuki pulled up a screen on her tablet. Your current asset allocation is as follows. 702 million in total net worth. 280 million in cryptocurrency holdings. 195 million in stock portfolio. 130 million in real estate holdings, all in your name alone. 65 million in private equity. 32 million in cash and bonds. She swiped to the next screen. Your connection to Marcus's assets includes the following. The penthouse, valued at 15 million, is in his name, but you provided the down payment and have been covering 60% of the mortgage. 3 vacation properties, valued combined at 18 million, same situation. You are also the guarantor on 3 of his major business loans totaling 60 million. And you currently own 35% of Wellington Technologies through various shell companies, which at current valuation is worth approximately $180 million. Elena absorbed this. And joint accounts? 2.3 million in joint checking and savings. You've contributed approximately 70% of that over the years. There are also 3 joint credit cards with a combined credit line of $450,000. James cleared his throat. I've also completed the investigation you requested 6 months ago into Marcus's corporate finances. He slid a file folder across the table. It's worse than we thought. Marcus has been running personal expenses through the corporate account for approximately 3 years. Restaurants, trips, gifts, all of it coded as business expenses and reimbursed through company funds. The total amount is approximately $200,000. That's textbook fraud. Elena opened the folder. Page after page of receipts. Romantic dinners with Amber coded as client meetings. Hotel stays coded as conference expenses. Jewelry purchases coded as employee gifts. There's more, James continued. He's been discussing a postnuptial agreement with his personal attorney. The draft I obtained suggests he wants to limit your access to marital assets and establish a monthly allowance of $50,000. He paused. Essentially, he's trying to cut you off from money that's mostly yours to begin with. The rage that Elena felt in that moment was cold and precise. Not the hot anger that makes people scream and throw things, but the kind of anger that calculates, the kind that plans, the kind that waits. Show me the exit strategy, Elena said quietly. Catherine pulled out a timeline. Phase 1 begins tonight. We remove your name from all joint financial accounts. Phase 2 begins Monday at 6 a.m. We begin liquidating your shell company holdings in Wellington Technologies. We've structured it so the stock sales will be gradual enough to be legal but fast enough to be devastating. The stock will drop significantly. Phase 3, we remove you as guarantor on his business loans. The banks will immediately require new collateral that Marcus doesn't have. Phase 4, we restructure the mortgages on all properties you've been paying for. They'll revert to his sole responsibility with his credit, which means his monthly obligations will triple overnight. Phase 5, we remove you from all joint credit. His credit limit will drop by 80%. By Monday evening, Marcus Wellington will wake up to discover he's essentially broke. And the divorce? Elena asked. We file Tuesday morning. New York is an equitable distribution state, but given that most of the assets are separately held in your name and you can prove he committed financial fraud, we're asking for nothing from him. No alimony. No property division. We just want a clean separation. He can keep his company, his name, his reputation, such as it is. You walk away with everything that was always yours. Yuki added, there's one more element. His company's board of directors. You're the largest shareholder through anonymous holdings, which means you effectively control the board. James has prepared a report on Marcus's corporate fraud that we can present to them Monday morning. They'll have no choice but to ask for his resignation. Elena looked at the 3 faces around the table. These people had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. 6 months of quiet investigation, careful planning, legal strategy. All of it waiting for the trigger. And Marcus had pulled that trigger himself by calling her a burden. Do it, Elena said. All of it. I want to be completely separated from him by Monday night. Legally, financially, personally. I want to vanish from his life so completely that he'll wonder if I was ever really there. Catherine nodded. There's one thing you should know. When this happens, it's going to be very public. Marcus is a known figure in tech. When his company stock crashes, when he loses his position, when the divorce becomes public, there will be media attention. Let there be media attention, Elena said. Let everyone know exactly what happened. Let them know that the man who called his wife a burden was actually being carried by her for 15 years. Let them know that the self-made billionaire was made by someone else entirely. She stood up. Gentlemen, lady, thank you for your preparation. I'll be at my hotel. Execute at dawn. Elena walked out of the conference room and took the elevator down to the parking garage. She got into her car, a modest Audi that she'd bought herself. Not the flashy Tesla that Marcus drove, the one she'd paid for. Her car. Her choice. She drove to the hotel she'd been staying at for the past week. Not a hotel Marcus knew about. A small boutique place in the West Village where she'd registered under her maiden name. She went up to her room and sat on the bed. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, where are you? I came home and you're not here. She typed back, staying at Rachel's tonight. Girls' night. See you tomorrow. Rachel was her college roommate, lived in Boston. Marcus wouldn't check. His response, okay, don't wait up. I've got early meetings, which meant he was with Amber. Elena set down the phone. She looked around the hotel room. In 3 days, this would be over. In 3 days, she'd be free. In 3 days, Marcus would understand exactly what burden meant. She opened her laptop and began making a list. A list of everything she'd accomplished that Marcus had taken credit for. A list of every dollar she'd invested that he'd claimed as his own success. A list of every time she'd made herself smaller so he could feel bigger. The list was long. And when she was finished, she sent it to Catherine with a single line. Make sure this becomes public record. Then Elena Volkov Wellington went to sleep for the last time as Marcus Wellington's wife. When she woke up, the execution would begin. And Marcus would learn what it felt like to carry his own weight. Sunday morning came with autumn sunlight filtering through expensive curtains. Marcus Wellington woke up at 9 a.m. in the penthouse he believed he'd bought with his own money. He stretched, yawned, reached for his phone. 3 messages from Amber. 1 from David about Monday's board meeting. Nothing from Elena, but that was normal. She was probably still at Rachel's. He went downstairs. The kitchen was empty, but there was a note on the counter in Elena's handwriting. Had to run errands. Left breakfast in the fridge. See you tonight. Marcus smiled. Even when she wasn't home, Elena made sure he was taken care of. He opened the fridge. French toast, fresh fruit, orange juice. He ate it absently while scrolling through emails on his phone. There was one from his lawyer about the postnuptial agreement. Draft is ready for Elena's review. Would suggest presenting it casually, framing it as standard financial housekeeping for people at your asset level. Marcus made a note to bring it up that week. It was time to formalize things. Make sure his assets were protected. Make sure Elena understood her place in the financial hierarchy. He finished breakfast and decided to go into the office. Sunday work made him feel productive, important. He got dressed in casual clothes, took his Tesla, drove to the Wellington Technologies headquarters. The building was mostly empty on Sundays. Marcus liked it that way. Quiet. He could think. He went to his office and started reviewing the expansion proposal he'd be presenting to the board on Monday. The numbers looked good. The projections were solid. This was going to cement his legacy as a visionary. He worked until 3 p.m., then headed home. Elena's car was in the garage. Good. She was back. He walked into the penthouse. Elena! In here! Her voice came from the living room. He found her sitting on the couch, reading a book. She looked calm, composed, exactly as she always did. How was Rachel? He asked. Good. We had a nice time. I worked on the expansion proposal. It's really coming together. Marcus sat down, waiting for her to ask questions, to show interest. That's good, Elena said, not looking up from her book. Marcus frowned slightly. You okay? You seem distant. Elena closed her book and looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a moment Marcus felt something strange. A flicker of unease. like he was missing something important. "I'm fine," Elena said. "Just thinking about the week ahead." "Right? Hey, my lawyer sent over some papers. Just a post-nup. Standard stuff for people at our level. Would you mind looking it over this week?" "Of course. I'll have my lawyer review it." Marcus blinked. "Your lawyer? You don't need a lawyer. It's just formality." "I always consult my lawyer on legal documents, Marcus." "That's just sensible." Something in her tone made Marcus uncomfortable, but he pushed it away. Elena was always sensible. That's who she was. "Sure, whatever makes you comfortable," he said. "I'm going to watch the game." "Enjoy." Marcus went to the TV room. Elena went back to her book. And neither of them spoke for the rest of the evening. What Marcus didn't know was that while he was watching football, Elena was sending encrypted messages to Catherine, Yuki, and James. Final confirmations. Final checks. Everything was ready. At midnight, Elena went upstairs to the bedroom she shared with Marcus. He was already asleep, snoring softly. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at him. This man she'd loved. This man she'd built up. This man who'd called her a burden. She felt nothing. That was the surprising part. She thought she'd feel sadness or anger or regret. But all she felt was the cold clarity of someone who'd made a decision and knew it was right. Elena went to the guest room. She'd been sleeping there for the past month, claiming she had insomnia and didn't want to disturb him. He'd barely noticed. She set her alarm for 5 a.m. In 7 hours, Marcus Wellington's world would begin to crumble. And he wouldn't even see it coming. Monday morning, 5 a.m. Elena woke before her alarm. She dressed in a black suit, professional and severe. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen counter with her laptop and waited. At exactly 6 a.m., her phone rang. "Catherine, we're executing now. Yuki is starting the account removals. James is sending the fraud documentation to the board. I'm filing the preliminary separation paperwork. This is the point of no return." "I know," Elena said. "Do it." What happened next occurred in a cascade. A precisely choreographed financial demolition that had been planned down to the minute. 6:15 a.m. Elena's name was removed from all joint bank accounts. The moment the banks processed the removal, they automatically recalculated the accounts based on Marcus's sole income and credit. The joint checking account that had held $2.3 million was suddenly flagged. Elena's lawyer had requested a division of assets. Elena's portion, $1.6 million, was transferred to her private account. Marcus's portion, $700,000, remained. But his automatic payments, his standing transfers, his monthly obligations, all of those were suddenly hitting an account with a much smaller balance. 6:30 a.m. Yuki Tanaka began executing the stock sales. Elena's shell companies owned 35% of Wellington Technologies. That stock was held in complex structures across multiple entities, but all of it was controlled by Elena. And now all of it was being sold. Not in one dramatic dump that would look like manipulation, but in a carefully structured series of sales that were perfectly legal and absolutely devastating. The moment those sell orders hit the market, the stock began to drop. 7%, 10%, 15%. 6:45 a.m. Elena's name was removed as guarantor on Marcus's business loans. 3 major loans, totaling $60 million, had been secured partially on her credit and her assets. When she removed herself, the banks immediately flagged the loans as undercollateralized. Automatic notices went out. New collateral required within 72 hours or the loans would be called. 7 a.m. The mortgages. Elena had been paying 60% of the penthouse mortgage through automatic transfers from her account. Those transfers stopped. More than that, Elena's lawyer contacted the bank and informed them that the down payment on the penthouse had come from Elena's premarital assets. A legal challenge was being prepared. The bank, spooked, immediately recalculated the mortgage based solely on Marcus's credit. His monthly payment tripled. 7:15 a.m. Credit cards. Elena removed herself from all joint credit cards. The credit limits, which had been based on their combined income and her excellent credit score, were immediately recalculated. Marcus's limit dropped from $450,000 to $50,000. His personal credit cards, which he'd maxed out months ago buying gifts for Amber, were already at their limits. 7:30 a.m. James Morrison sent an encrypted file to Wellington Technologies Board of Directors. The file was marked urgent. Financial irregularities requiring immediate board review. Inside was documentation of every fraudulent expense Marcus had filed over 3 years. Every restaurant with Amber coded as a client dinner. Every hotel stay coded as a business trip. Every gift coded as an employee bonus. All of it documented, dated, proven. By 8 a.m., Marcus Wellington's financial life had been systematically dismantled, and he was still asleep in his penthouse, dreaming of expansion plans and Asian markets. 8:30 a.m. Marcus's alarm went off. He woke slowly, rubbed his eyes, reached for his phone. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. 9 emails marked urgent. His stomach dropped. He started with David, his CFO. The text just said, "Call me immediately." Marcus called. David answered on the first ring. "Marcus, where are you?" "Home." "What's going on?" "You need to get to the office right now." The board called an emergency meeting. "The stock is crashing. We've lost 20% since market open. Someone's dumping massive amounts of shares." "What? Who?" "We don't know. It's coming through shell companies. But whoever it is owns 35% of our company and they're liquidating everything." Marcus felt ice in his chest. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and started scrolling through emails. One from his bank. Mortgage payment failed. Insufficient funds. Another from his bank. Loan collateral insufficient. Response required within 72 hours. Another from his credit card company. Credit limit adjustment notice. What the hell was happening? Marcus got dressed fast, his hands shaking. He ran downstairs. Elena's car was already gone. She must have left early. He tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. He got in his Tesla and drove to the office, his mind racing. The stock was crashing. His loans were being called. His mortgage payment had failed. It didn't make sense. Everything had been fine on Friday. Everything had been perfect. He got to Wellington Technologies at 9 a.m. The office was chaos. Employees huddled around computer screens watching the stock price fall. David was waiting for him at the elevator. "The board wants to see you immediately." "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know. But it's bad, Marcus. It's really bad." They walked to the boardroom. 8 board members sat around the table. Their faces were grim. Marcus sat down. "Okay. Someone tell me what's happening." The chairman, a man named Robert Hutchinson, slid a file folder across the table. "We received this documentation this morning from a forensic accountant. It details approximately $200,000 in fraudulent expense claims you filed over the past 3 years. Personal expenses coded as business expenses. It's detailed, dated, and completely damning." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "I can explain. We also discovered this morning that our largest shareholder is liquidating their entire position. 35% of company stock. The shareholder has been anonymous since our Series B funding. But this morning, as part of the liquidation, their identity was revealed to us." Robert paused. "It's Elena. Your wife owns 35% of this company. Or she did. She's selling everything." The room spun. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "It's not impossible. It's documented. Elena has been your largest investor since the company was founded. The seed funding you claimed came from angel investors. That was Elena. The Series B funding? Elena. The capital infusions that saved us 3 times? All Elena." Robert's voice was cold. "You built this company on your wife's money while telling everyone you were self-made." Marcus couldn't breathe. David spoke up quietly. "The banks are also calling your loans. Apparently your guarantor removed themselves. That was Elena too, wasn't it?" Marcus nodded numbly. "So let me be clear about what's happening," Robert said. "Your wife has removed her financial support from your company, causing a stock crash. She's removed her guarantee from your loans, causing a credit crisis. And we've discovered you've been committing corporate fraud for years. Do you understand the position you're in? Marcus looked around the table. Every face was hard, closed off. We're asking for your resignation, Robert said. Effective immediately. You can resign voluntarily or we'll terminate you for cause. But either way, you're done. You can't do this, Marcus said desperately. I built this company. This is my vision. You built it with someone else's money, Robert interrupted. And now that someone is taking their money back, the company will survive. We'll reorganize, bring in new leadership. But you're out. Marcus stood up, his legs weak. I need to talk to Elena. I don't think Elena wants to talk to you, David said quietly. Marcus left the building in a daze. He sat in his car in the parking lot and tried calling Elena again. Voicemail. He tried texting. No response. He called her friends. No one answered. Finally, he called Catherine Wu. He'd met her a few times at social events. She was Elena's lawyer. Catherine answered on the third ring. Mr. Wellington. Catherine, I need to talk to Elena. Where is she? I'm not at liberty to discuss Mrs. Wellington's location. Mrs. Wellington? What? Catherine, what's happening? The stock is crashing. The board just fired me. My loans are being called. Yes, I'm aware. I'm handling Mrs. Wellington's separation strategy. The word hit him like a physical blow. Separation. You'll be receiving divorce papers by end of day tomorrow. I'd suggest you retain counsel. Divorce? Catherine, I don't understand. I think you understand perfectly, Mr. Wellington. You called your wife a burden. In front of colleagues. In front of people who knew exactly who she was and what she'd done for you. And now she's removing that burden from your shoulders. You'll be carrying your own weight from now on. I need to talk to her. Please. She doesn't wish to speak with you. Goodbye, Mr. Wellington. The line went dead. Marcus sat in his car and felt his entire world collapsing. His company was gone. His stock was worthless. His loans were being called. His wife was divorcing him. And he still didn't fully understand why. He drove home in a fog. The penthouse felt empty, cavernous. He walked through rooms that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. Because they did. Elena had chosen everything. The furniture, the art, the colors. He'd never paid attention. He just enjoyed the result. He went to her study. The door was open. The room was empty. Her desk was cleared. Her bookshelves were bare. Her computer was gone. It looked like she'd never been there. Marcus walked to the dining room table. And there, in the center, was an envelope with his name on it. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter in Elena's neat handwriting. Marcus, you called me a burden. In front of Richard Chun, who's been on my advisory board for 15 years. In front of David Okonkwo, who knew I owned 35% of your company. In front of people who knew exactly what I'd done for you. So let me educate you about burden. The 50 million that seeded Wellington Technologies? Mine. The 80 million that saved you during Series B and C? Mine. The penthouse you think you bought? I paid for it. The vacation homes? Mine. The comfortable life you think you built? I built it. While you told everyone you were self-made, I was making you. While you took credit for vision and strategy, I was funding every move. While you called me a burden, I was carrying you. I am not a burden, Marcus. I am not dead weight. I am not your trophy wife who doesn't understand business. I am a $700 million investor who chose to stay silent while you performed. And now I'm choosing to be silent no more. I have removed myself from your finances completely. The stock crash? That's me liquidating my investment in your company. The loan crisis? That's me removing my guarantee. The mortgage problems? That's me stopping payment. On a property I bought. From this day forward, you carry your own weight. You'll receive divorce papers tomorrow. Don't contest them. My lawyers are better than anything you can afford. I want nothing from you. Not the penthouse. Not alimony. Not support. I just want to be free of a man who never saw me. There's something you should know. Richard Chun at that dinner? He knew who I was. David Okonkwo? He knew. Most of the tech world knows. They just respected my privacy. They understood that I preferred to work behind the scenes. But you never asked. In 15 years, you never once asked who I really was. What I'd built. What I'd accomplished. You assumed I was decorative. Supportive. Simple. You were wrong. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope you enjoy carrying the empire you thought you built alone. You'll find it's much heavier without someone else holding it up. Elena. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then 4 times. The words didn't change. The reality didn't change. $700 million. She'd been worth $700 million and he'd never known. She'd built his entire company and he'd taken credit. She'd funded his life and he'd called her a burden. He tried calling her one more time. The number was disconnected. He tried emailing. Automatic reply. This address is no longer active. She'd erased herself completely. Marcus sat at his dining table, in his penthouse that he couldn't afford, holding a letter from a woman he'd never actually known, and finally understood what he'd lost. Everything. And it was far too late to get any of it back. The next 6 months unfolded with brutal efficiency. Marcus's company was acquired by a competitor and dismantled. The shareholders got a decent payout, but Marcus, with his worthless stock options and terminated employment, got nothing. The fraud investigation led to criminal charges. He pled guilty to avoid trial and received 2 years probation, community service, and a mandate to pay restitution. The penthouse went into foreclosure. Marcus moved into a modest apartment in Queens. He took consulting work where he could find it, but his reputation was destroyed. The tech world had long memories. Amber, his mistress, stopped returning his calls the day he got fired. His parents, disappointed by his treatment of Elena, offered minimal support. And Elena? Elena became public. After 15 years in the shadows, she emerged. She gave interviews. She spoke at conferences. She revealed her investment history, her board positions, her decades of silent work in tech. The media loved the story. The invisible billionaire. The woman who built Silicon Valley in secret. How Elena Volkov shaped tech while her husband took credit. Her Invisible Power Fund launched with $100 million dedicated to funding women-led startups. In the first year, it funded 50 companies. The success rate was 73%, triple the industry average. She started the Burden Scholarship for women who'd left careers to support partners and wanted to restart their professional lives. She became exactly what she'd always been, but now the world could see her. And 8 months after leaving Marcus, she met a man named Daniel, an architect who didn't know who she was, who asked about her day, her thoughts, her dreams, who listened, who saw her. They took it slow. Coffee, then dinners, then quiet evenings cooking together. He never asked about her money. He asked about her hopes, her fears, the books she loved, the places she wanted to see. And for the first time in 15 years, Elena felt seen. 1 year after the dinner at Oriole, Elena stood on stage at a tech conference. The keynote speaker. The auditorium was packed. Daniel sat in the front row. He smiled at her. She smiled back. And then she began to speak. A year ago, someone called me a burden. And in that moment, I made a choice. Not to prove him wrong, but to prove myself right. I spent 15 years making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I funded empires while living in shadows. I built kingdoms while accepting scraps. But here's what I learned. You can't be a burden if you're carrying yourself. And I carry $700 million. I carry the dreams of 200 companies. I carry the hopes of thousands of women who were told they don't understand business. So to anyone who's been called a burden, remove your support. Let them carry their own weight. And watch them crumble while you soar. The auditorium erupted in applause. Elena walked off stage and into her new life. A life where she was visible, valued, free. And Marcus? Marcus watched the keynote on YouTube from his small apartment. He watched the woman he'd called a burden accept a standing ovation from an industry that finally knew her name. He watched her walk off stage with confidence and grace. And he finally understood what he'd lost. Not just money, not just status, but a partner who'd been extraordinary, and he'd been too blind to see it. He closed his laptop and sat in the silence of his small apartment, the weight of his choices crushing him. While across the city, Elena laughed over dinner with a man who saw her, really saw her, and she was finally, completely, beautifully free. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's simply walking away from people who can't see your value, and building something so bright they can't look away. Elena had done both, and she never looked back.